The humidity of Seoul in the summer felt like a damp silk veil against Victoria's skin. Standing nearly 6 feet tall in her Laubautin heels, she caught her reflection in the glass of the Incheon arrival's gate. Her skin, a deep, radiant bronze inherited from her South African mother and her diplomat father's lineage, glowed under the airport lights. She was the diplomat's daughter, a title she had spent her 20s trying to outrun in London. Victoria, over here. Suar, her best friend from high school, waved frantically. Beside her stood a sleek black sedan and a driver who looked more like a soldier than a chauffeur. As they hugged, Victoria felt a strange prickle on the back of her neck. "You look like a goddess," Suar squealed, pulling back to admire Victoria's curves, hugged tight by a cream knit dress. "The wedding is tomorrow. Everyone is dying to see you, especially the ones who remember the quiet girl who used to read poetry while the rest of us gossiped." "I missed you too, Suar," Victoria laughed, though the unease didn't leave her. As the car pulled away, she noticed a silver SUV trailing them at a precise distance. She brushed it off as Seoul traffic. She didn't know that her arrival had been logged into a database the second her passport was scanned. He already knew she was home. The Schiller Hotel ballroom was a sea of white peonies and crystal. Victoria moved through the crowd like a queen. Her dress was a daring, backless silk number in emerald green that contrasted beautifully with her complexion. Men turned their heads so fast it was audible. "Victoria, you remember Junho?" Suar whispered, nodding toward a man approaching them. Junho was the heir to a shipping empire, handsome in a way that felt manufactured, with an arrogant tilt to his chin. He didn't look at Victoria's face, his eyes travelled slowly down her body, lingering on her hips. "I heard the diplomat's daughter had grown up," Junho said, his voice slick. "But the rumours didn't do you justice. You're exotic for these parts." Victoria stiffened. She knew the type, rich, bored, and used to getting what he wanted. "I'm South African, Junho, not exotic, just a person." He chuckled, reaching out to touch her arm. "Feisty, I like that. I'll make sure we have a dance later. I don't take no for an answer." Victoria pulled her arm away, a cold shiver running down her spine. But the shiver wasn't because of Junho. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, as if the oxygen had been sucked out. The music seemed to dim. The reception was in full swing. Victoria was on the dance floor with one of the groomsmen, a polite lawyer who was clearly intimidated by her height and beauty. As they moved to a slow tempo, Victoria felt the lawyer's hands begin to shake. "Is everything all right?" she asked. The lawyer wasn't looking at her. He was looking over her shoulder, his face turning a ghostly shade of grey. I have to go, excuse me." He practically bolted. Victoria stood alone in the centre of the floor, confused. She turned around and the world stopped. Standing 3 feet away was a man who looked like he was carved from obsidian. Do-Yun, the boy who used to sit in the back of the class with 2 silent bodyguards at the door. He was no longer a boy. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that cost more than a suburban house, and his eyes, cold, dark, and predatory, were fixed entirely on her. "You're late, Victoria," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated in her chest. "Do-Yun," she breathed, "I didn't think you'd be here." "I am everywhere you are," he replied. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. He simply stood there, claiming the space around her as if she were his property. "Dance with me," Do-Yun commanded. It wasn't a request. Victoria, usually headstrong, found her feet moving toward him. When his hand touched the small of her bare back, his skin felt searing hot. He moved her with a terrifying efficiency. "I heard you were in London," she whispered, trying to regain her composure. "I heard you took over your father's business." "The Mafia lord," Do-Yun's lip curled in a cruel mock smile. "Is that what they call me now? It's accurate enough." He leaned into her ear, his breath ghosting over her skin. "Do you remember the lilies you received every Tuesday in high school, Victoria? And the red roses that arrived at your flat in London every week for 3 years?" Victoria froze. "Those were from an anonymous admirer. I thought it was a classmate." "It was me," he hissed. "And the boy you dated in your 2nd year, the one who disappeared after your 3rd date, he didn't lose interest. I gave him a choice, his tongue or his life. He chose his life." Victoria tried to pull away, horror dawning on her. "You're insane. You ruined my life from thousands of miles away." "I protected what was mine," he said, his grip on her waist tightening until it almost bruised. "And now that you're back in my city, the games are over." Before Victoria could scream or flee, Junho, the Keeble heir, stepped over, fueled by expensive whiskey and misplaced confidence. "Hey, I was supposed to get this dance," Junho snapped, reaching for Victoria's hand. Do-Yun didn't even look at him. With one hand still firmly on Victoria's waist, he used the other to grab Junho's wrist. There was a sickening pop sound. Jun-ho let out a strangled yelp, dropping to his knees. Do-yun, stop, Victoria cried, grabbing his arm. Do-yun looked at her then, his eyes devoid of any warmth. You like this trash, Victoria? Is this what you want? A man who smells of gin and unearned money. He looked down at Jun-ho as if he were an insect. If you look at her again, I will burn your father's shipyards to the ground with you inside them. Move. Jun-ho scrambled away, clutching his wrist in terror. Do-yun turned back to Victoria, his gaze scanning her emerald dress with blatant disapproval. This dress is too revealing, he said coldly. You're showing the world what only I'm allowed to see. We're leaving. I am not going anywhere with you, Victoria snapped, her diplomatic spine finally returning. Do-yun stepped closer, towering over her. You think you have a choice? Look at the doors, Victoria. She looked. At every exit stood two men in black suits, their eyes fixed on her. The entire hotel was under his thumb. I've waited 10 years, Do-yun whispered. You're going to learn that in Seoul there is no law but me. The ride to the penthouse was silent and suffocating. Victoria sat pressed against the door of the Maybach, watching the neon lights of Seoul blur into streaks of cold blue and neon pink. Do-yun sat on the opposite side, tapping a rhythmic, predatory beat on his knee. My father will find out about this, Victoria said, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain stoic. He has connections in the Blue House. You can't just abduct a diplomat's daughter. Do-yun didn't even look at her. Your father is a man of peace, Victoria. I am a man of results. He has already been informed that you are staying with an old friend for your safety. He thanked me. You lied to him. I bought him, Do-yun corrected coldly. I funded his latest charitable foundation in Cape Town. He thinks I'm a philanthropist. He has no idea his daughter is currently sitting in a car with a monster. He finally turned his head, his dark eyes raking over her curves. And you aren't going to tell him otherwise, not if you want him to keep his position. The car pulled into the private garage of a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The elevator ride was ear-poppingly fast. When the doors opened, Victoria was met with a sprawling, minimalist penthouse. It was beautiful, but it felt like a tomb. Do-yun stripped off his suit jacket, tossing it onto a leather sofa. Underneath, his white shirt strained against his muscular frame, the faint outline of tattoos visible through the thin fabric. There are 3 bedrooms, he said, pointing toward a hallway. You will stay in the master suite with me. Your luggage has already been moved from the Schiller. I am not sleeping in your bed, Victoria snapped. Do-yun walked toward her, his pace slow and deliberate. Victoria backed up until her calves hit the edge of the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights were 1,000 miles below. You've spent years in London giving yourself to boys who didn't know your worth, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, his touch rough. You think you're so independent, so modern. But here you are mine. You will eat when I say, you will dress how I like, and you will sleep where I tell you. He leaned in, his scent, sandalwood and expensive tobacco, filling her senses. You're a beautiful, spoiled girl, Victoria. It's time you learned how to serve a king. The next morning, Victoria woke up to the sound of shouting. She had managed to lock herself in the guest room the night before, though she suspected Do-yun had let her have that small victory out of sheer boredom. She walked into the living area to find Do-yun standing by the window, his back to her. In front of him stood Jun-ho, the Keeble heir from the wedding. Jun-ho's arm was in a sling, and his face was flushed with a mix of fear and arrogance. My father owns the docks, Do-yun, Jun-ho yelled. You can't just snatch a woman like her, she's a high-profile guest, if you don't hand her over the police. Do-yun moved faster than Victoria could blink. He grabbed Jun-ho by the throat and shoved him against the glass wall. The police work for me, your father works for me, you are a fly buzzing around my head, Jun-ho. He looked over his shoulder and saw Victoria standing there in a silk robe. A cruel light sparked in his eyes. You want her, Do-yun asked Jun-ho. Look at her, she's stunning, isn't she, but she's too much for a boy like you. He let go of Jun-ho's throat and looked at Victoria. Victoria, come here, tell this pathetic boy who you belong to. Victoria stood frozen. She looked at Jun-ho, who looked at her with a mix of lust and desperation, and then at Do-yun, whose expression was pure, icy dominance. I don't belong to anyone, Victoria said firmly. Do-yun's face darkened. He walked over to her, his hand gripping her hair, not enough to hurt but enough to force her to look up at him. Wrong answer. He turned back to Jun-ho. She's stubborn. I enjoy breaking stubborn things. Get out before I decide your other arm needs a matching sling. Once Jun-ho had scrambled out of the penthouse, Do-yun turned his full attention to Victoria. He let go of her hair and shoved her lightly toward the sofa. You think you're being brave, he said, his voice low. But you're just being difficult. Junho is a predator. If I hadn't taken you, he would have drugged you at that wedding and had his way with you in the back of a limo. I'm the only thing keeping you from the real monsters of this city. You are a monster, she cried. I am your monster, he corrected. He reached down, gripping the lapels of her robe. And since you want to act like a brat, you can stay in this room until you learn how to speak to me with respect. 3 days of isolation passed. Victoria was provided with the finest food and clothes, but she saw no one but the silent guards. On the 4th night, the door opened. Du-yun walked in, smelling of rain and adrenaline. He looked like he had just come from a fight. There was a small cut on his knuckle. Are you ready to be a good girl yet? He asked, his voice rough. Victoria stood her ground, but her body was betraying her. The tension, the fear, and the strange, dark, magnetic pull she had felt since high school were reaching a boiling point. Why are you doing this, Du-yun? If you wanted me, you could have asked. I don't ask, he said, stepping into her space. He grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against him. Victoria gasped, her hands instinctively landing on his broad chest. I've watched you from the shadows for 10 years. I've imagined the way your skin would feel under mine every single night. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, teasingly close but not quite touching. Do you want me, Victoria, or are you going to keep pretending you don't feel this? I hate you, she whispered, even as her fingers curled into his shirt. Good, he murmured, his mouth finally crashing onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a battle. He tasted of power and possession. He lifted her easily, her long legs wrapping around his waist. He carried her to the bed, his hands roaming over her curves with a hunger that was borderline feral. As he stripped away her clothes, his eyes never left hers. He was mean, he was demanding, and he took her with a ruthlessness that left her breathless. It wasn't about romance, it was about marking his territory. And as Victoria arched her back, crying out his name into the quiet of the penthouse, she realized with a sinking heart that the boy from high school had finally caught what he was hunting. The morning after was steeped in a strange, heavy silence. Victoria woke in the vast bed, the sheets tangled around her. Du-yun was already gone, leaving only the faint scent of his cologne. Her body ached, a testament to the night's fierce encounter. She was violated, claimed, yet a part of her felt a confusing tremor of something akin to surrender. It was a terrifying realization. She found him in the living room, dressed in another impeccable suit, nursing a cup of coffee while staring out at the cityscape. He didn't acknowledge her presence directly. There's a car downstairs, he said, his voice flat. It will take you to your fitting. I've arranged for a new wardrobe. You won't be wearing anything that invites the gaze of other men again. Victoria felt a fresh surge of defiance. You can't just buy me new clothes and expect me to be okay with this, Du-yun. What we did last night. He finally turned, his eyes piercing. What we did was exactly what was always going to happen, Victoria. I laid my claim. You resisted, I took. It's the natural order of things. You are mine now, understand that. He walked over to her, his finger tracing the delicate line of her collarbone. This is not a game. This is your life now. And if you try to run, I will find you. And when I do, I will make you regret every single step you took away from me. The fitting was a small boutique, opulent and entirely empty save for a terrified seamstress and 2 of Du-yun's silent bodyguards. Victoria was presented with racks of clothes, beautiful, expensive, but all conservative. High necklines, long sleeves, flowing skirts. Nothing that showed skin. Nothing that hinted at the woman beneath. He wants to erase me, Victoria thought, her anger simmering. This is all exquisite, Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But I don't see anything for dancing or for a night out. The seamstress, looking pale, gestured vaguely to a few cocktail dresses. These are approved, ma'am, nothing too revealing. Victoria picked up a stunning, deep blue gown that was floor-length with a modest neckline, but hugged her curves with exquisite precision. This one then, and a few like it. I'll make sure he sees what he's missing. As she tried on the dress, a bold thought sparked in her mind. Du-yun wanted control, but control could be twisted. She would wear the clothes, but she would wear them on her terms. She would be his queen, not his doll. It was a dangerous game, but Victoria had always thrived on challenging authority. Meanwhile, Junho was stewing in a private hospital suite, his wrist wrapped in a thick cast. His pride was more damaged than his bones. He had tried to challenge Du-yun and been publicly humiliated. But Junho was not one to back down, especially not when a woman of Victoria's caliber was at stake. Find out everything about her, Junho barked at his terrified assistant. Where she goes, who she sees, what she eats. I want her schedule, her habits, every detail. Sir, Du-yun's men are everywhere. It's too dangerous, the assistant stammered. Are you questioning me? Junho snarled, throwing a glass of water at the wall. Do-yun may control the streets, but I control the money. And in this city, money can buy anything, even a few minutes with a woman he thinks is his. I will not let that bastard win. She will be mine. He had seen the way Do-yun looked at Victoria, like a starving wolf eyeing its prey. Junho didn't want Victoria out of love, he wanted her because Do-yun wanted her. It was a game of status, and Junho refused to be the loser. He knew Do-yun had a public appearance coming up, a charity gala he couldn't miss. That would be his window. A week later, Victoria was escorted to a high-profile charity gala. She was dressed in the deep blue gown she had chosen, her dark skin luminous against the rich fabric. Do-yun met her at the top of the stairs, his eyes raking over her with an almost imperceptible nod of approval. You look tolerable, he said, his voice flat, but a possessive light danced in his eyes. He offered her his arm, his grip firm and unyielding. As they walked into the ballroom, every head turned. The whispers followed them like a Greek chorus. Is that Do-yun's new woman? She's the diplomat's daughter. He's claimed her. Do-yun didn't acknowledge the crowd. He led Victoria directly to a private table, his hand resting on the small of her back. He introduced her to no one, spoke to her minimally, yet his presence beside her was a constant, suffocating declaration of ownership. He was not there to entertain her, he was there to display her. Victoria felt like a beautiful, silent accessory. Her anger flared, but she kept her face carefully neutral. She would play his game for now. She noticed a flash of blonde hair across the room, Junho glowering at them from a discreet distance. He hadn't given up. This was going to be a long night. During a lull in the speeches, Do-yun was called away to speak with a powerful politician, leaving Victoria alone for the first time that night. She watched him move, a king among wolves, his power absolute. A shadow fell over her, alone at last, Victoria. Junho, he looked dishevelled, a few strands of hair out of place. His good arm held a fresh drink. I saw what he did to you at the wedding. No woman deserves to be treated like that. And you think you're better, Victoria scoffed. You tried to paw me, Junho, you're just a less powerful version of him. Perhaps, he conceded, a glint in his eye. But I offer freedom. He offers a gilded cage, he thinks he owns you, but what if you were to simply vanish? Victoria looked at him, a flicker of fear mixed with intrigue. What are you talking about? There's a private jet waiting at Gimpo, Junho whispered, leaning closer. His breath smelled of expensive liquor. It can take you anywhere. London, Paris, anywhere Do-yun can't reach you, you just have to say the word. Before Victoria could reply, a low voice rumbled from behind them. She's not going anywhere with you, Junho. Do-yun stood there, his face a mask of cold fury. He had finished his conversation much faster than anticipated. His eyes narrowed on Junho, then on Victoria, a terrifying possessiveness in their depths. The game had just escalated. The atmosphere at the gala turned from celebratory to lethal in a heartbeat. Do-yun didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. He stepped between Victoria and Junho, his presence like an incoming storm. I gave you a chance to keep your life, Junho, Do-yun said, his voice a low, vibrating hum of menace. Now you're whispering treason in my woman's ear. Junho tried to maintain his smirk, but his hand trembled, sloshing his drink. It's a free country, Do-yun. She can leave if she wants. Do-yun stepped into Junho's personal space, his hand moving so fast the crowd didn't see it. He gripped Junho's throat, slamming his head back against a marble pillar. The sound of skull meeting stone echoed. In this city, I am the only freedom she has. If I see you near her again, I won't break a bone. I'll dismantle your family's legacy piece by piece. He dropped Junho like a sack of trash and turned to Victoria. His eyes were no longer cold, they were burning. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. We're leaving now. They didn't make it to the Maybach. As they exited the hotel's side entrance, the screech of tires tore through the night. 2 black SUVs blocked the path. Men in tactical gear not belonging to Do-yun spilled out. Protect the girl, Do-yun roared, shoving Victoria behind him as his own bodyguards drew their weapons. The alleyway erupted in gunfire. Victoria squeezed her eyes shut. Pressing her back against the cold brick wall, she saw Do-yun move with a terrifying, fluid grace. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a soldier. He fired with surgical precision, his face a mask of primal focus. One of the attackers lunged for Victoria, a sedative needle in his hand. Before he could reach her, Do-yun was there. He didn't use his gun, he used his bare hands, snapping the man's neck with a sickening crack. He turned to Victoria, his shirt splattered with blood. Get in the car, he commanded. For the first time, Victoria didn't argue. She saw the monster he had warned her about, and in this moment he was the only thing keeping her alive. They didn't return to the penthouse. Instead, the car raced toward the outskirts of the city, arriving at a fortified compound hidden in the mountains. The safe house was a concrete fortress, cold and sterile. Du-yun paced the room like a caged tiger. Jun-ho's father is more desperate than I thought. He hired Russian mercenaries. They weren't trying to kill me, they were trying to snatch you to use as leverage. Victoria sat on a wooden chair, her emerald dress torn at the hem, her breath hitching. Why am I the prize in your war? Du-yun stopped packing and looked at her. The meanness was still there, but it was edged with a raw, bleeding honesty. Because everyone knows you're the only thing I've ever wanted that I couldn't simply buy. You're my only weakness, Victoria. And in my world, a weakness is a death sentence. He walked over to her, his hand stained with the blood of the man he'd killed for her. He touched her cheek, leaving a faint red smear. I should have let you stay in London, but I'm too selfish to let you belong to anyone else. Victoria spent the night watching Du-yun through a cracked door. He was on the phone barking orders in rapid-fire Korean. She heard words like liquidation, docks, and no survivors. She realized then that the boy she had known in high school was gone. This man was a product of a violent cycle. When he finally entered her room, he looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed. It's done, he said. The shipping yards are burning. Jun-ho and his father are currently being questioned by my associates. They won't be a problem anymore. Did you kill them? Victoria whispered. Du-yun walked toward the bed, his movements slow and heavy. I did what was necessary to ensure no one ever touches you again. Does that make me a villain in your eyes, Victoria? Or does it make me the only man who can actually keep you safe? He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her. You have a choice. Tomorrow I can put you on a plane to South Africa. I'll wipe your records, you can be free. Or you stay here and you accept that you are the queen of a graveyard. Victoria looked at his broad, scarred back. She thought of the flowers in high school, the way he had watched over her for a decade, and the way her heart hammered against her ribs whenever he was near. She didn't want the safety of a boring life. She wanted the fire. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, Du-yun. He turned, his eyes searching hers for a lie. Finding none, he groaned, a sound of pure, unadulterated need. He pulled her into his lap, his hands devouring her. This time the meanness was replaced by a desperate, hungry intensity. He stripped her with a feverish haste, his mouth finding the sensitive skin of her neck. Victoria met his passion with her own, her fingers digging into his muscles, marking him as hers just as he had marked her. In the middle of a concrete fortress, surrounded by death and shadows, they found a violent kind of peace. He took her with a possessiveness that felt like an anchor, and as Victoria cried out in the dim light, she knew she had finally stopped running. She wasn't just his prisoner anymore, she was his partner in the dark. The sun rose over the mountains, bleeding gold into the grey concrete of the safe house. Victoria woke not to fear, but to a cold, crystalline clarity. Beside her, Du-yun was already awake, watching her with an intensity that no longer felt like a threat, but like a shield. The world will know by noon, he said, his voice sandpaper rough. They will know that Jun-ho's empire has fallen and that you are the reason I burned it. Victoria sat up, the silk sheet slipping down her bronze skin. She didn't reach to cover herself. She looked him in the eye, her diplomatic poise hardening into something more formidable. Then we shouldn't keep them waiting. If I am to be the queen of a graveyard, I expect to be dressed for it. Du-yun's lips tilted in the first genuine smirk she had seen, a flash of pride in his dark eyes. He leaned over, kissing her with a slow, possessive heat. My beautiful, blood-stained rose. By midday, they were back in the heart of Seoul. The news was flooded with reports of a massive electrical fire at the Jun-ho family docks and the sudden retirement of his father from the shipping board. The underworld, however, knew the truth. Du-yun held a meeting at a private club beneath the city. The heads of the 5 major families were there, sweating in their designer suits. Victoria walked in 2 steps behind Du-yun, wearing a black tailored suit that hugged her tall, curvy frame, her hair slicked back. She looked like a goddess of war. From today, Du-yun announced, his voice echoing in the vaulted room, Victoria handles the diplomatic side of our international shipping. Any insult to her is an act of war against me. One elder began to protest, a woman, a foreigner. Du-yun didn't even speak. He simply placed his hand on the table and the room went silent. The elder lowered his head. Victoria realized then that Du-yun wasn't just being mean to her. He was mean to the entire world to ensure no one dared look at her with anything but awe. Before they left the club, Du-yun led Victoria to a soundproofed room in the back. Inside, Jun-ho sat tied to a chair. He was no longer the arrogant heir. He was a broken man, his face bruised and his spirit shattered. He wanted to see you one last time. Du-yun said coldly, leaning against the doorframe watching Victoria's reaction. Jun-ho looked up, his eyes unfocused. Victoria, please, he's a monster, he'll destroy you. Victoria walked up to him. She looked down at the man who had tried to kidnap her, who had seen her only as a trophy to spite a rival. She felt no pity. You didn't want me, Jun-ho, she said softly. You wanted his power, but you're too weak to hold even a fraction of it. She turned to Du-yun. I'm done here, let's go home. Du-yun nodded to his men. Jun-ho's fate was sealed not by a bullet, but by the absolute irrelevance Victoria had granted him. A month later, Victoria's father visited Seoul. They met at a high-end restaurant overlooking the Han River. He looked at his daughter, taller, more radiant, and carrying an air of authority that surpassed even his own. You seem changed, Victoria, he said, glancing at the 4 assistants standing at a respectful distance. I've found my place, Dad, she replied, sipping her tea. Du-yun and I are expanding the trade routes. We're doing things the traditional way, but with a global perspective. Her father sighed, a man who knew the world was rarely black and white. As long as you are happy and safe. I am the safest woman in the world, she said, and she meant it. As she left the restaurant, Du-yun was waiting in the car. He pulled her inside, his hands immediately finding her waist, his possessiveness as constant as the North Star. He was still the mean, silent boy from school, but he was hers. The story of the South African beauty and the Korean Mafia lord became a legend in the Seoul underworld. They were an unstoppable force, the diplomat's grace and the dragon's fire. Every Tuesday, Victoria still received lilies. Not from a stalker in the shadows, but from the man who sat across from her at dinner every night. He was still demanding, still jealous, and still ruled their lives with an iron fist, but Victoria had learned how to wield that fist alongside him. As they stood on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over the city they now owned together, Du-yun pulled her back against his chest. Are you ever sorry you came back for that wedding? He murmured into her ear. Victoria leaned her head back, watching the neon lights reflect in the dark sky. She thought of London, the flowers, the broken boy in the back of the class, and the man who had burned a city for her. No, she whispered, turning in his arms to kiss him. I think I was always coming home to you. The shadows of Seoul were no longer a place to hide. They were their kingdom.